He wasn't supposed to be there. 3 professional killers had just surrounded one of Manhattan's most powerful women, and every trained bodyguard in the building had been deliberately pulled away. The restaurant fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Then a side door swung open, and a man in a gray uniform stepped out pushing a mop cart. What happened in the next 4 seconds would be captured on 17 different camera angles, shared 40 million times, and debated by security experts for months. But the man at the center of it all simply checked that the woman was breathing, then tried to walk away. If you've ever wondered what real courage actually looks like when it has nothing to prove, stay with me. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. Hit the like button and drop a comment telling me what city and country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the night everything changed. The first thing most people learned about Aurelius the restaurant, not the Roman emperor it was named after, was that the waiting list ran 14 months. The second thing they learned, usually while being seated, was that the lighting had been designed by someone who understood that the wealthy preferred to be seen without appearing to want to be seen. Soft gold sconces, tables spaced generously apart. Staff trained to materialize only when needed and vanish the rest of the time. Sienna Whitmore had eaten there 11 times in 4 years, always for business, never because she particularly enjoyed the food. Tonight was no different. She sat across from Raymond Chu, a venture partner at a fund that managed somewhere north of $8 billion. And she was explaining for the third time in 90 minutes why Whitmore Technologies' new data infrastructure platform was not overvalued at its current projection. Raymond kept nodding in that particular way that meant he was listening but not hearing, and Sienna kept talking because she had learned long ago that the moment you stop talking in a room like this, someone else filled the silence with doubt. She was 30 years old. She had founded her company at 23, survived 2 near collapses, survived 1 very public lawsuit, and survived 4 years of being described in financial press as either a visionary or a liability, depending on the quarter. She had never once survived a dinner like this without leaving with exactly what she came for. Her phone buzzed under the table. She ignored it. Raymond reached for his wine. The acquisition you made last spring. The crop to analytics deal. There are people on my team who think the integration has been rougher than your public statements suggest. Your people are right, Sienna said. Raymond paused, glass halfway to his mouth. The integration was rough, she continued. We underestimated the cultural gap between the 2 engineering teams. We lost 11 people in the first quarter who we shouldn't have lost. I spent most of February fixing something my VP of operations should have caught in October. She picked up her own glass. But the architecture is sound. The client retention held at 91% through the disruption. And the revenue trajectory for that division is now exactly where I projected it would be 18 months ago. So yes, it was rough, and it worked. Raymond studied her for a moment. Then he smiled, a real one this time, not the practiced version he'd been wearing all evening. All right, let's talk structure. Her phone buzzed again. And then Marcus, her head of personal security, appeared at her elbow, which was unusual, because Marcus understood that appearing at her elbow during a dinner like this was something that did not happen. Ms. Whitmore. His voice was controlled in the way that meant it was costing him something. We have a situation at the secondary entrance. Your vehicle, there may be a threat assessment issue, and I need Chen and Dalton with me to clear it. 5 minutes. Sienna looked at him. You're pulling all 3 of you. Precautionary. There's a uniformed officer already positioned near your table. You'll be fine for 5 minutes. She glanced around the restaurant. Tuesday evening, maybe 40% capacity. A sommelier refilling water near the window. A busboy collecting a dessert plate 2 tables over. And in the far corner near the service corridor, a man in a gray maintenance uniform pushing a mop cart with the specific unhurried patience of someone being paid by the hour. 5 minutes, she said. Marcus was gone before she finished the sentence. Raymond was already talking about term sheet structure when Sienna noticed the 3 men. They hadn't come through the front. That much she processed first, because she had been in enough difficult rooms to have developed the low-grade habit of tracking entrances. They came from the direction of the private dining hallway, moving with a casual coordination that would have looked like nothing to most people. To Sienna, it looked exactly like what it was. People who had practiced moving through a space together. One of them made eye contact with her, not the idle glance of a curious diner. Something else. Something that landed in her chest like cold water. Raymond said something she didn't catch. The three men changed direction. Toward her. Later, the investigators would determine they had entered through a service access point, that the threat pulling Marcus and his team away had been staged, and that the entire operation had required at minimum 2 weeks of surveillance and at least one person inside her organization feeding information. All of that would come later. What Sienna knew in that moment was simpler and more immediate. She was alone at a table. Her security team was gone, and three men were walking toward her with the flat, purposeful expressions of people who had already decided what they were going to do. Stood. The nearest man moved faster, and then the service corridor door opened. Logan Barrett had been working the late shift at Aurelius for 11 months. He took the position because it started at 9 p.m. and ended at 2 a.m., which meant he could get Maya to school by 8, pick her up by 3:30, help with homework, make dinner, put her to bed, and still have time to get across town for work. The schedule was inconvenient in the way that most things in his life currently were, manageable if you didn't think too hard about it, exhausting if you did. He was 37 years old. He had a daughter. He had a 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria with a broken radiator that the landlord had been promising to fix since November. He had a shelf of Maya's artwork above the kitchen table and a photograph of his wife, Carrie, on the nightstand facing the wall now, because looking at it directly was still not something he could do every morning without it costing him the first hour of his day. He had also once been other things, but he rarely thought about that. He pushed the cart through the service door into the main dining room and stopped. It wasn't dramatic. There was no particular instinct that fired, no rush of something cinematic. It was simply that the 11 years of training had rewired certain parts of his perception to process threat before his conscious mind caught up with what he was seeing, and what he was seeing was wrong. 3 men, spacing too deliberate for coincidence. The one on the left, slightly ahead, which meant he was the approach, and the others were containment. A woman standing from her table, recognizing the problem a beat too late, no security visible anywhere, restaurant staff oblivious. Logan left the cart. He crossed the dining room in the time it took the nearest man to close half the remaining distance to Sienna's table, and he came in from an angle, quiet and direct, not running because running drew screams and he didn't want screams. The first man sensed him at the last possible moment and turned. What happened next lasted approximately 4 seconds. Logan took the first man out of the equation with a controlled joint lock that put him face down on the carpet without breaking anything he was particular about that, even now. The second man came in fast from the right and landed one solid hit to Logan's ribs before Logan redirected the momentum and introduced the man's shoulder to the edge of a nearby table in a way that ended his participation immediately. The third had a weapon, a compact stun device, not a firearm, which told Logan these men had instructions to deliver, not to kill, which was information. And Logan stripped it from his hand with a technique that was efficient and not gentle and left the man seated on the floor, reassessing his evening. 12 seconds, total. Maybe 14. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Logan straightened. He was breathing harder than he wanted to be. The rib hit had been solid, and he was 37, not 26. He looked at the woman across from him. She was standing very still, one hand on the back of her chair. And she was staring at him with an expression that he'd seen before on people who had just processed the difference between the situation they thought they were in and the situation they had actually been in. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She blinked no. "Anyone else at the table?" She looked at the empty seat across from her. No. He must have left when she shook her head slightly. "No, just me." Logan nodded. He heard running footsteps from the direction of the entrance, Marcus and his team. Finally, coming back at a pace that suggested they'd heard something. He heard a woman crying somewhere near the windows, which meant the adrenaline in the room was starting to find its exits. He heard one of the 3 men on the floor groaning, which was fine. Groaning was fine. "Your security is coming," he said. "Wait." Sienna took a step toward him. "Who are you?" "I work here." He moved back toward his cart. "You should sit down. You might feel it in a minute." Feel what? The shaking. He looked at her steadily. Comes after. Just sit down. Marcus arrived then, two uniformed restaurant security behind him, and Logan stepped back and let the professionals who were supposed to be there do the thing they were supposed to be doing. He retrieved his cart. He moved toward the service corridor. Hey. Sienna's voice stopped him. She was still watching him. What's your name? He considered not answering. It was a brief consideration, but genuine. Logan, he said. Then he pushed the cart through the door and let it swing shut behind him. Maya had left a drawing on the kitchen table. It was of the two of them Logan recognizable mainly by the exaggerated height and the small circle that represented the watch he always wore. Maya rendered with the cheerful, artistic confidence of an 8-year-old who had not yet absorbed the idea that proportion mattered. They were standing in front of what appeared to be a mountain, though Logan suspected it might be a very large piece of toast. Below it, in careful letters that still showed the ghost of pencil erased underneath, me and Dad. Best team. He stood in the kitchen at 3 a.m., still in his uniform, his ribs aching in a way that suggested he'd need a day before he could take a full breath without noticing it. He read the note 3 times. Then he went to check on Maya. She was asleep in the position she always slept, one arm flung out sideways, as if reaching for something in a dream, her dark hair spread across the pillow. Her stuffed rabbit named, with the merciless pragmatism of small children, Rabbit was tucked under her chin. Logan stood in the doorway for a moment. He had made a choice, 2 years ago, that most people in his former life had found difficult to understand. He had walked away from everything he was trained to do, everything he was good at, and he had taken a job pushing a cleaning cart through a restaurant because it fit around a school schedule. People assumed he was running from grief. Some of them weren't entirely wrong. But the larger truth was simpler. Maya was 8 years old. She had already lost her mother at 6, and Logan had looked at his daughter, one morning really looked at her, over cereal and orange juice, and a morning cartoon she'd seen 4 times, and understood that the most important mission of his life was sitting right there at the kitchen table, asking him to please make sure her toast wasn't too crunchy. Everything else could wait. He went to bed. He did not think about the restaurant. He thought about Maya's drawing and the mountain that might be toast, and whether the radiator would finally get fixed before winter really arrived. He was asleep in 4 minutes. The morning was a Tuesday routine that Logan had long since stopped calling routine because Maya resisted the word. It's not routine, she explained to him once, with the absolute certainty of someone who had thought deeply about this for several minutes. Routine is boring. We have a system. What's the difference? Systems are on purpose. Logan had conceded the point. The system involved cereal for Maya, coffee for Logan, a brief argument about whether she needed a jacket. She did not think so. The October weather disagreed. 2 wrong turns locating her library book. And a walk to school that took 9 minutes unless they stopped to look at the dog that lived on the corner of 30th, a basset hound named Harold, who greeted every passing child with the spiritual exhaustion of an animal that had accepted its situation. Harold looks sad today, Maya said. Harold looks the same every day. That's because you don't read his expression properly. She looked up at Logan with the particular expression she reserved for adults, failing to grasp basic emotional realities. He's having a medium day. Not sad, medium. How do you know? His ears are doing a different thing. Logan looked at Harold. Harold's ears were, in fact, doing something he couldn't specifically categorize. Okay, he said. You always say okay when you don't actually understand. That is accurate. She took his hand for the last half block to the school gate, which she still did without self-consciousness and which Logan knew would not last forever, so he did not take it for granted. At the gate, she hugged him around the middle carefully, which meant she had noticed the way he'd moved this morning and looked up at him. You okay, Dad? Medium day, he said. She grinned. Harold taught you something. Then she was through the gate into the current of other children, and Logan stood on the sidewalk watching until she disappeared into the building. His phone buzzed, unknown number, Manhattan area code. He let it go to voicemail. By the time he reached the subway, he had 3 missed calls from the same number, 2 from a different one, and a text from the restaurant manager that read, Logan, call me when you can. Nothing's wrong, you're not in trouble. Just some people asking. He stood on the platform with his hands in his pockets and the dull ache in his ribs, reminding him that last night had been real. He had known, walking out of that restaurant in the early morning hours, that the quiet he'd built was probably not going to survive the week. He just hadn't expected it to start unraveling before Maya finished her cereal. The train came. Logan got on. He watched the tunnel walls go dark outside the window and thought, not for the first time, that the hardest part of having skills you didn't want anymore was that they didn't care whether you wanted them. They were just there, waiting, patient in the way that only things without feelings can be patient. Pulled someone off a woman in a restaurant. He hadn't killed anyone. He hadn't broken anything he wasn't willing to break. He'd walked away. That was supposed to be the end of it. He already knew, somewhere underneath the exhaustion, that it wasn't. The missed calls kept coming. By Thursday morning, 41 hours after the incident at Aurelius Logan's phone had received contact attempts from 2 local news stations, a producer at a national morning program, someone claiming to represent a podcast about extraordinary civilians, and a number registered to Whitmore Technologies' corporate communications office, which had called 4 times. He answered none of them. What he could not control was the footage. Someone in the restaurant never identified, despite the investigators' efforts, had captured approximately 22 seconds of the confrontation on a phone camera. The angle was partial, the lighting was poor, and Logan's face appeared clearly for only about 3 of those seconds. It didn't matter. The clip had been posted by Wednesday morning and had moved through the internet with the specific velocity reserved for things people found both stunning and slightly hard to believe. By Thursday afternoon, the count was somewhere past 30 million views, and the comment sections had divided themselves, as comment sections do, between people who found the footage inspiring and people who were certain it had been staged. Logan watched it once, on Maya's tablet while she was at school, then put the tablet down and washed the breakfast dishes. The footage did not show the part where his hands had been shaking slightly afterward. It did not show him standing in the Aurelius kitchen 15 minutes later, braced against a stainless steel counter, waiting for his heart rate to finish doing what it needed to do. The body's response to that kind of event did not disappear just because you knew what you were doing. It just showed up on a delay, like an invoice. What worried him more than the footage was what the footage would lead someone to find. He was not hard to identify. He understood that. 11 months at Aurelius meant paperwork, a tax ID, a social security number attached to a work history that, if anyone pulled it far enough, would arrive at a military record that was partially classified and partially not, and the part that wasn't classified was enough. He picked Maya up from school Thursday afternoon and took her for pizza because it was Thursday, and Thursday was, per the system, pizza day. People at school were talking about the video, Maya said, pulling a string of cheese back toward her slice with the focused patience of someone diffusing something. Logan looked at her. What video? She gave him the look. The one that meant she was aware he knew exactly what she was talking about. The restaurant video. Mrs. Petrakis showed it in homeroom because she said it was a good example of someone helping stretch her. She paused. Was that you? He considered his options. Maya was 8, not 4. Yeah, he said. She chewed for a moment, thinking. He could always tell when she was actually thinking versus when she was just quiet. Her eyes went to a specific middle distance, slightly above eye level. Did it hurt? A little. Your ribs. You've been moving like your ribs hurt. I'm fine, May. I know you're fine. I asked if it hurt. He almost smiled. Yeah, it hurt. She nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with this distinction. Then was it scary? No. He thought about it more honestly. Not during, after, a little. Because of the shaking? He looked at her. How do you know about the shaking? You told me once. You said after something big your body has to catch up. She picked up her pizza. I think that's the body being honest. Logan said nothing for a moment. His daughter had a way of arriving at things that stopped him sometimes, not because the ideas were sophisticated, but because they were accurate in a way that an 8-year-old had no business being accurate. Yeah, he said. That's a good way to put it. They finished the pizza. Logan paid. Maya took his hand on the walk back, which she did, when she sensed something without necessarily being able to name it, and they walked 2 blocks before she said, Are people going to bother you now? Some people might try. What are you going to do? Not talk to them. She considered this. That'll probably work for a while. It worked for approximately 40 more hours. Sienna Whitmore arrived at the Astoria address on a Saturday morning. She had spent 3 days resisting the impulse, which she recognized as unusual for her because she did not typically resist impulses, she analyzed them, determined whether they were strategically sound, and acted or didn't act. The impulse to find the janitor from the restaurant had been analyzed and found to be, depending on how she framed it, either entirely reasonable or slightly irrational. She had sent the corporate communications team away. She had come alone, in a car she drove herself, wearing jeans and a jacket that cost more than they looked like they cost. The building on 31st Street was 4 stories of brick with a fire escape that had clearly been painted over several times, and a front door buzzer panel where 3 of the buttons had no corresponding label. She found the right name L. Barrett, 3B, and pressed it. Silence. Then, who is it? The voice through the intercom was flat in the way of someone who had already decided the answer was probably going to be no. My name is Sienna Whitmore. She paused. You helped me on Tuesday night. A longer silence. I know who you are, Logan said through the intercom. Okay. How did you find this address? I have a good research team. Another pause. She heard faintly through the intercom a child's voice saying something she couldn't make out. Then Logan's voice, away from the speaker, just a minute, May. Then back to her, what do you want? I'd like to talk to you. About what? About Tuesday, and about what I'd like to offer you. I don't want anything. You haven't heard what I'm offering. I don't need to. Sienna looked at the intercom. This was not typically how conversations about significant financial offers went. In her experience, people generally wanted to at least hear the number before saying no to it. Mr. Barrett, she said, I'm not here to cause you any trouble. I'm here because someone tried to hurt me, and I don't understand why. And the only person who was actually in that room who seems to have their head on straight is a man who is currently refusing to open a door. She paused. Could you give me 10 minutes? She waited. The buzzer sounded. The apartment was nothing like what she was used to. She registered this without judgment. It was simply factual, in the same way it was factual that the hallway smelled like old wood, and someone's cooking from a floor above, or that the third step on the staircase was distinctly louder than the others, or that apartment 3B had a hand-drawn paper sign on the door that read, "Knock quiet, Maya is thinking." She knocked quietly. Logan opened the door. He was in a gray t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, looking like someone who had been in the middle of something domestic. She could see the tail end of a project on the kitchen table, what appeared to be an elaborate cardboard structure in an early and ambitious stage. He looked at her for a moment, with an expression she couldn't quite read. Come in, he said. Not warmly, not unfriendly, just a fact. The apartment was small and organized in the way that single parents organize things. Everything had a place, because there wasn't room for anything not to have a place, and the places were mostly functional rather than decorative. Except for the wall above the kitchen table, which was covered in children's drawings, some recent and some older, layered slightly like sediment. Sienna found herself looking at them longer than she intended. A girl appeared from the hallway. 8 or 9, dark hair, currently holding a roll of masking tape and looking at Sienna with the direct, uncomplicated assessment of a child who had not yet learned to pretend she wasn't evaluating people. Are you the lady from the restaurant? She asked. Sienna glanced at Logan. He said neutrally, Maya. I'm not being rude, Maya said. I'm asking yes, Sienna said. I am. Maya nodded. Cool. Then to her father, are we still doing the castle? Give me a few minutes. Okay. Maya handed him the masking tape, apparently because he'd need it later, and disappeared back down the hallway with the calm efficiency of someone managing their time. Logan set the tape on the counter and looked at Sienna. Coffee? Please. They sat at the kitchen table with the cardboard castle foundation between them, which Sienna felt lent the conversation a particular quality she couldn't name. Logan's coffee was strong and made in a regular drip machine that appeared to have been bought sometime in the previous decade. I want to offer you a position, Sienna said. Director of Personal Security at Whitmore Technologies. Starting salary $140,000, full benefits, company vehicle. Logan looked at her. No, he said, you haven't. I heard you. He wrapped his hands around his mug. No, Sienna set her coffee down. Why? Because I have a job. You have a job pushing a cleaning cart. Yeah, she looked at him. He was watching her with a patience that she found, unexpectedly, slightly infuriating, not because it was hostile, but because it was complete. He wasn't negotiating. He wasn't performing humility. He simply meant what he said. You were a Navy SEAL, she said. Something shifted in his face. Not much. Enough. My research team is very good, she said, not unkindly. Logan was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, a car passed. From down the hallway, the muffled sound of Maya apparently reorganizing something heavy. That was a long time ago, he said. The skill set doesn't seem to have degraded significantly. I'm not interested in using it. Why? He looked toward the hallway. The answer was obvious enough that she felt slightly embarrassed for having asked it out loud. Right, she said. Maya. She's 8. She already lost her mother. He said it evenly, not for sympathy, just as information. She needs a father who comes home from work at 2 in the morning and complains about the subway. Not one who stopped. No. Sienna looked down at her coffee. There was something in the way he said it, the specificity of complaints about the subway, that caught her somewhere unexpected. I'm going to be direct with you, she said. You've been pretty direct so far. What happened Tuesday night wasn't random. Someone pulled my security team away deliberately. Someone planned this. She watched his face. I don't know who. I don't know why. My company is currently trying to find out, but I have a security apparatus that just demonstrated it can be manipulated, and I don't know who inside it I can trust. Logan said nothing. I'm not asking you to be a bodyguard, she said. I'm asking you to consult, to look at what I have and tell me where the holes are. Hire someone professional. I just watched 3 professionals get systematically removed from a room so that someone could walk up to me over pasta. Her voice came out flatter than she intended. Professional apparatus failed. You didn't. He looked at her for a long moment. I'll think about it, he said, which she could tell, from the way he said it, was meaningfully different from no. She left 30 minutes later. She sat in her car on 31st Street and looked at the building and thought about the apartment, the castle on the kitchen table, the drawings on the wall. She thought about the way Maya had handed him the masking tape. Then she put the car in drive and went home. Logan thought about it for 4 days. He told himself he was thinking about the security consultation. The practical question of whether he could look at Sienna Whitmore's operation, identify the vulnerabilities, and walk away. A limited engagement, a defined problem with a defined end. What he was actually doing, with the honesty he applied to things when Maya wasn't watching, was thinking about what she'd said, about not knowing who inside her own organization she could trust. He knew what that felt like, not from corporate experience, but from the particular variety of operational dread that came from working in environments where the intelligence feeding your decisions might be compromised. It was a specific kind of vertigo. He had not missed it. He also, though he spent less time examining this, kept thinking about the way she'd looked at Maya's drawings on the wall. Not with the polite, performed interest that adults sometimes brought to children's artwork. Something quieter, like she was reading something she hadn't expected to find there. He called the number she'd left on the Saturday of her visit. It was a Wednesday afternoon, Maya at school, Logan at the kitchen table with his 3rd coffee. I'll consult, he said when she answered. 1 month. I look at what you have, tell you what I find, and you fix it. After that, I'm done. A brief pause. Okay. And I need a schedule that works around my daughter. I can work with that, and I'm not taking the director title. What do you want to be called? He thought about it. Consultant is fine. All right. Another pause shorter. Thank you, Logan. He wasn't sure what to do with that. I'll come by your office Monday. He hung up and sat for a moment. Then he texted his manager at Aurelius, explained that he'd need to reduce his shifts for the next month, finished his coffee, and started making a list. Whitmore Technologies occupied the top 7 floors of a building in Midtown that had been designed to say we are serious without saying it out loud. The lobby had good sightlines and inadequate camera coverage. The elevator bank required keycard access after the 7th floor, but the stairwell access was governed by a system that Logan identified as 3 versions behind its current software update before he reached the 15th floor. He noted this without comment. He was writing a list. Sienna's office was on the 22nd floor, corner position which was bad for exactly the reasons. Corner positions were always bad, and she had a glass wall facing the open floor plan, which was worse. She was on a call when he arrived and held up one finger, which he took to mean she'd be a moment, and he spent that moment standing in the doorway, cataloging the 18 things that were wrong with the physical security arrangement of the space. She finished the call and looked at him. "You're making a list. 17 things on this floor alone." She leaned back in her chair. "That's a lot. It'll be more when I'm done." He looked at the glass wall. "Who decided on the transparent office?" It was supposed to be a statement about open leadership culture. It's a statement about where you sit when someone wants to find you. Sienna looked at the glass wall as if seeing it differently. "I've been in this office for 2 years. I know." He finally sat down across from her. "Problem. Patterns are predictable. Your schedule, it's your routes. Your seating position, if someone watched you for 3 weeks, they'd know more than they should. And you think someone did. I think someone did more than that." He set his notebook on the desk. "Who schedules your security team's assignments?" "Marcus Riley, head of corporate security." "How long has he been in that position?" 4 years. "How long has he been with the company?" 6. Logan wrote something. "I need access to your security scheduling system." "Historical data, minimum 6 months." Sienna looked at him steadily. "I can get you that. I also need the personnel files for everyone on Marcus's team." A small hesitation. "That's more complicated. You asked me to find the holes." He looked at her directly. "Someone knew your schedule the night of the restaurant. Someone knew how to pull your team away without triggering your own alert protocols. That's inside information. It came from somewhere close." The word mole sat between them unspoken for a moment. "I know," she said. It came out quieter than her usual register. "I've been trying not to. I've known these people for years." "I understand. Do you?" He thought about a different kind of team, in different circumstances, and what it had felt like the one time in his career that trust had been misplaced in a way that had consequences. "Yeah," he said, "I do." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she reached for her phone to call IT for the security system access. The next weeks moved in a rhythm that Logan had not expected to find comfortable. Mornings still belonged to Maya. The walk to school, Harold the Basset Hound's emotional weather assessment, the particular argument of the day jacket or no jacket, whether it was possible to eat cereal that had been sitting in milk for 10 minutes without it becoming fundamentally different cereal, whether the upcoming school project on ecosystems should focus on ocean or forest. Logan's position on the cereal question was pragmatic. Maya's was philosophical. Then the subway to Midtown, where Logan worked through Sienna's security operation with the specific focus of someone who had spent a decade finding weakness in systems designed by people who believed they had no weakness. He found 17 vulnerabilities in the first 4 days. He found signs of a data leak by the end of the week. He did not tell Sienna immediately. He spent 3 days confirming what he was seeing, tracking the pattern of which confidential information had been accessed, when, and cross-referencing it with who had clearance at those specific times. The access logs told a story that the person leaving the fingerprints had clearly believed would be invisible. They were wrong by a margin significant enough to suggest they'd been doing it long enough to feel safe. Logan presented it to Sienna on a Thursday afternoon. He laid it out methodically, the access log timestamps, the scheduling correlation, the information that had subsequently appeared in the operational awareness of whoever was targeting her. Sienna listened without interrupting, which she'd come to recognize as her processing mode. She went very still, and her eyes did a specific thing where they sharpened. When he finished, she was quiet for almost a minute. "Marcus has been with me since the beginning of the security division," she said. Not defending, just stating the weight of it. "The evidence doesn't tell us motive," Logan said carefully. "Tells us access. Can I trust your analysis?" "No," he said. "You should verify it independently." She looked at him. "That's an unusual answer. You're asking me to point at someone who's been in your organization for 6 years. You should make sure I'm right before you act on it." He paused. "Get someone from outside a forensic digital security firm. Give them the same access logs without telling them what to look for. If they find what I found, you'll know. And while I'm doing that, you act like nothing's changed. Marcus keeps his access. Nothing moves. The effort that cost her was visible. briefly, before she covered it. You're asking me to go on having normal conversations with someone who may have tried to have me killed. I'm asking you to not make a move that tips him off before we know what we're dealing with. She was quiet again, then with the particular flatness of someone who had made decisions under pressure before. Okay. He was almost at the door when she said, "Logan." He stopped. "How are you?" She paused, like she was rearranging what she'd been about to say. "How is Maya?" It was not what he'd expected. "She's good. Finishing a school project on ocean ecosystems." She chose ocean? She said forest was the obvious choice, and she prefers to think past the obvious. Something crossed Sienna's face. Quietly amused, and then something else. "She sounds like she's about 35. She's going on 40, Logan said. "It's alarming sometimes." He left. On the subway home, he thought about the conversation longer than was strictly necessary. He brought Maya to the Whitmore Technologies offices on a Saturday, which had not been planned. The original arrangement had been that Logan would come in to finish his review of the physical security layout on the 22nd and 23rd floors. Maya had a playdate scheduled with her friend Danny from school. Danny's mother had called at 10 a.m. with a stomach bug and genuine apologies, and Logan had been standing in the middle of his apartment, holding his keys and looking at his daughter, who was looking back at him with the expression of someone who was 9/10 fine and 1/10 disappointed. "You can come with me," he said. "It'll be boring. I'll bring my book. You'll have to be quiet. I'm always quiet." This was not true, but he let it go. Sienna was in her office when they arrived, which she hadn't mentioned she would be. She looked up when Logan appeared in the doorway with Maya beside him, and her expression did something, a flicker of surprise, and then something that wasn't quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. "I had a change of plans," Logan said. "She can sit in the conference room." "Sit wherever she wants," Sienna said. Then, to Maya, "I'm Sienna." Maya looked at her with the assessment face. "I know. You're the lady from the restaurant." A pause. "And from the picture online." "That's me. My dad says you run a technology company." "I do. What kind of technology?" Sienna's expression shifted into something more genuine. "Data infrastructure. Software that helps large organizations manage their information." Maya considered this. "Is it interesting?" "Most days." "What makes it interesting?" Logan watched Sienna pause, not buying time, actually thinking about the question. "Figuring out why systems fail," she said finally. "Everything looks fine on paper, and then something breaks, and you have to trace it back to the original mistake. It's like a puzzle that costs money when you get it wrong." Maya nodded slowly. "Dad does that too, but with people instead of systems." A beat of silence. "He does," Sienna agreed. Maya seemed satisfied with this and went to the conference table with her book. Logan spent the next 3 hours finishing his physical layout review while Maya read and, at one point, accepted a hot chocolate from Sienna's assistant without being asked whether she wanted one, which she noticed, and which Logan could tell she appreciated, the not being asked, the assumption that, of course, she would want hot chocolate on a cold Saturday. At one point, he looked through the glass wall and saw Sienna sitting across from Maya at the conference table. Maya was apparently explaining something from her book. Her hands were doing the thing they did when she was explaining, two of them moving in slightly different directions, and Sienna was listening with an attention that wasn't performed. Logan looked away and went back to his notebook. He told himself it was nothing worth examining. The external security firm confirmed his findings on a Tuesday, 2.5 weeks after he'd first presented them to Sienna. They identified the same access pattern, the same timestamp correlation, the same data trail. Their report arrived in Sienna's inbox at 9 in the morning, and Logan was sitting across from her when she read it. She read it twice. Then she set her phone face down on the desk. "It's him," she said, "not a question. The evidence says yes." She was quiet. Logan watched her process it, the 6 years, the trust, whatever version of Marcus she'd believed she knew. He didn't try to speed it along. "What do we do now?" she asked. And Logan, who had spent 2.5 weeks arriving at an answer to exactly that question, leaned forward and started explaining. Plan was dangerous. He was aware of that. Told her so, directly, before he outlined any of it, because he had learned a long time ago that the worst thing you could do to someone before a difficult operation was let them walk into it with a clean picture of the risk. Sienna listened. She asked 3 precise questions. She didn't flinch at any of it. When? She asked when he finished. 2 weeks. We need to set the stage, she nodded. Her hands were folded on the desk, and they were entirely still, and Logan understood that this was what she looked like when she had made a decision and closed the door behind it. All right, she said. Let's do it. Outside the window, Manhattan kept moving 22 floors below. The street-level current of yellow cabs and pedestrians and food carts and the ordinary machinery of the city that had no interest in the specifics of what was being planned in a corner office above it. Logan gathered his notebook and stood. Logan. Sienna's voice stopped him again. A habit he was starting to notice. Whatever happens, I want you to know that what you're doing matters. He stood there for a moment. Let's just make sure it works, he said. Then he left and did not look back through the glass wall and took the elevator down to the lobby, where the cameras still had inadequate coverage and the stairwell software was still 3 versions behind. Some things, at least, were still straightforward. 2 weeks before the operation were the kind of quiet that Logan didn't trust. Everything on the surface of Sienna's professional life continued normally. She attended meetings. She took calls. She exchanged emails with Marcus Riley about security protocols, speaking to him in the measured, collegial tone of someone who had no idea what she knew, which Logan understood was costing her something she wasn't fully accounting for. He could see it in small ways, the slight tension across her shoulders when Marcus appeared in a hallway, the fraction of a second she took before responding to him directly. The way her eyes went flat and controlled in a manner that was different from her usual focus. She was holding it together, but it had a weight. Logan didn't comment on it. He understood that some things you just carried until you didn't have to anymore. What he spent those 2 weeks doing, when he wasn't working the logistics of what was coming, was thinking about Maya. Plan required him to be present at Sienna's estate in Connecticut for what might become a sustained confrontation with a group of trained operatives. He had run the numbers in his head the way he used to run mission parameters entry points, response times, variables he could control, and variables he couldn't. Property had 4 acres. The main house had 11 rooms. He had walked it twice at different times of day, measuring sightlines and timing police response from the nearest substation. 22 minutes on a good night, more if the weather turned. 7 men, according to the intelligence Sienna's outside security contractor, had quietly developed on Derek Voss and his operation. Possibly more. Logan had operated against worse odds. That wasn't the part that kept him awake. The part that kept him awake was Maya. He had made her a promise 2 years ago that he'd kept imperfectly and obsessively and without exception, that she would not go to sleep in a house where he wasn't coming home. He had never missed bedtime without a phone call. He had never missed a school morning. He had arranged his entire life around the architecture of her days, because she was 8 years old and her mother was dead, and some promises you make not because you're a good person, but because the alternative is something you simply refuse to contemplate. The night before he moved Maya to her aunt's place in New Jersey, Carrie's sister, Dana, who smelled like lavender and made pancakes on the weekends and was the closest thing Maya had to a grandmother. He sat on the edge of her bed, after she'd finished brushing her teeth and before the light went out. "You're going away for a few days," Maya said. Not a question. A few days. Maybe 3, because of the Sienna thing. He'd told her enough. Not everything she was 9, not a colleague, but enough that she understood the general shape. Someone had tried to hurt Sienna. Logan was helping make sure they couldn't try again. Maya had listened to this with the specific gravity she brought to serious things, and then asked whether Sienna was scared. A little, Logan had said. Is she good at being scared? He'd thought about that. Yeah, she is. Now Maya pulled her blanket up and looked at him. Will you be careful? I will. Really careful. Not just saying it. Really careful. She studied him with those dark eyes that sometimes reminded him so much of Carrie that it sat in his chest like pressure. Promise me something. What? That you remember you have somewhere to come back to. He looked at her. I mean us, she said. Me and the apartment and Harold and the castle. You have somewhere to come back to. So remember that. Logan sat there for a moment. He was 37 years old, and he had faced things that had required significant nerve, and he was not going to fall apart in his daughter's bedroom. But it was a near thing. I remember, he said. He kissed her forehead, turned out the light, and went to the kitchen and stood there for a while, looking at the drawings on the wall. The estate was 40 minutes north of the city, set back from a private road behind a stone wall that looked impressive and was, structurally, inadequate against anything more determined than casual curiosity. Sienna had bought it 3 years ago as a retreat, used it maybe a dozen times, and had never particularly loved it. It was too large for one person and too quiet in a way that felt like a comment on something. Logan arrived on a Thursday morning and spent most of the day doing what he'd done in Sienna's Midtown office, walking the space systematically and writing things down. The main house, the guest house, the equipment shed at the northern edge of the property, the emergency generator position, the gap in the stone wall on the eastern side that someone had patched with a temporary fence and then apparently forgotten about. Sienna arrived in the afternoon, driving herself again, which she'd taken to doing. She came out to where he was standing at the eastern boundary and looked at the gap in the wall. "I didn't know that was there," she said. "That's the problem." He pointed toward the tree line beyond. Anyone doing surveillance on this property for more than 48 hours would find it. It's the most natural approach vector if you want to come in without touching the front gate sensors. And you want them to use it. I want them to think they're using something we don't know about. He turned back toward the house. We're going to put them exactly where we want them to be. They worked through the rest of the afternoon together, and Logan registered without making anything of it that working with Sienna had become something he didn't have to manage. In the first weeks at Whitmore Technologies, there had been a layer of navigation to it, the professional distance of two people establishing terms. That had worn away. She asked direct questions and absorbed the answers without ego. When he showed her something that was wrong with her own security setup, she looked at it instead of defending it. That evening, they ate takeout Thai food at the kitchen table of the main house and went over the final logistics of what Logan was calling, in his head, the operation and what Sienna was calling, with a dryness he'd come to recognize as her specific brand of managing stress, the insane plan. "The leak goes through Marcus at 11 a.m. tomorrow," Logan said. "Confidential executive retreat. You and the board, this property, this weekend, sensitive acquisition discussions. No outside security, just estate staff. And you think he'll pass it to Voss immediately. I think he's been passing things immediately for months. He's been reliable. Voss trusts the channel." He pushed the takeout container aside. "The response time, based on what we know about Voss's operation, is probably 18 to 24 hours. They'll want to move before the weekend is over." Sienna turned her water glass in slow circles on the table. "And if something goes wrong, things will go wrong," Logan said. "Something always goes wrong. The question is whether we've built enough margin around the plan that the things going wrong don't matter. Have we?" He looked at her directly. "I think so." "I'm not going to tell you I'm certain, because I'd be lying." She nodded. That was something he'd learned about her. She preferred an honest, uncertain answer to a confident, dishonest one, which was rarer than it should have been in someone who ran a company where people were frequently trying to tell her what she wanted to hear. "Okay," she said. "The police contact is confirmed. They'll be staged 20 minutes out, ready to move on my signal. 22 minutes was your number. I've been working on that." He almost smiled. 20. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the Connecticut dark was complete in the way that rural dark was no city ambient. Just the wind through the tree line and the occasional car on the distant road. "Logan." She set down her water glass. "If something happens to you." "Sienna, let me finish." Her voice was steady, but it had an edge under it that he recognized as the thing she kept below the waterline in professional settings. "If something happens to you, Maya loses her father. I need you to know that I am aware of that fact, and I'm aware that you being here is a choice you made and not a debt you owe me." He looked at her across the kitchen table with the takeout containers, between them and the overhead light doing what overhead lights do, and he thought, not for the first time and with more honesty than before, that Sienna Whitmore was not who he'd expected her to be. "I know," he said. "Do you? I know exactly what I'm choosing and why." He paused. "You're worth protecting. That's not nothing." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked away at the window. "Get some sleep," he said, standing. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day of pretending everything is normal." "My specialty," she said, dryly, but it landed differently than it would have 6 weeks ago. Marcus took the bait at 11:47. Logan was watching the access logs on a secured secondary system he'd installed without Marcus's knowledge during his third week at Whitmore Technologies, a digital tripwire that recorded every time the confidential scheduling system was accessed and copied. At 11:47 a.m. on Friday, Marcus logged in, pulled the fabricated retreat details, and the copy function activated. Logan sent Sienna a single text. He took it. Her response came back in 40 seconds. Okay. There was nothing else to say. He spent Friday doing the final physical preparation of the property. He knew how it would look to anyone watching from outside. A woman arriving with minimal visible security, a handful of estate staff, the lights moving through the house and the patterns of people settling in for a weekend. What was actually happening behind those lit windows was methodical and unglamorous. Logan moving through the property with the practiced attention of someone who had done this kind of preparation before, in environments considerably less comfortable than a Connecticut estate. He placed the things he needed where he needed them. He confirmed the communication channel with the police staging point. He walked the interior of the house twice more in the dark, without lights, until the spatial map was fixed cleanly in his head where the furniture was, where the door frames were, which floors had boards that moved and which didn't. At 9 p.m. he called Maya. How's Dana's? She made waffles for dinner. Breakfast for dinner is underrated. It's completely rated appropriately. You're wrong. How are you? Fine. Getting ready. Pause. Be the kind of careful where you come home after. That's the only kind I'm planning on. Okay. Another pause. Told Dana about Sienna. She thinks it's good that you're helping someone. It is good. She also said you should ask her to dinner sometime. Sienna as like a regular dinner, not a work dinner. Logan was quiet for a moment. Tell Dana to mind her business, he said. She said you'd say that. Maya sounded pleased with this prediction. Love you, Dad. Love you, May. Waffles sound good. He hung up and stood in the dark hallway of the main house, and despite everything the weight of the next several hours, the specific calculation of risk he'd been running in his head for 2 weeks, he was smiling slightly. Then he heard a car on the road outside. He checked his watch. 1:53 a.m., he moved to the window. They came in through the eastern gap, as he'd expected. He counted 7 of them, which matched his intelligence, and which was the last thing that went according to the plan. The first deviation was timing. Voss had moved faster than the 18 to 24-hour window, closer to 14 hours, which meant either his intelligence on Sienna's patterns suggested this weekend was an expiring opportunity, or someone had pushed the timeline. Logan filed this away and adjusted. The second deviation was position. He'd expected the group to split into 2 teams 5 through the eastern approach, 2 as exterior perimeter. Instead, all 7 came through the gap, which meant Voss had enough confidence in his intelligence that he wasn't concerned about an exterior threat. That overconfidence was useful. It also compressed the response window significantly. Logan sent the police signal at 2:04 a.m., 20 minutes minimum. He worked the math. Sienna was in the east wing as planned, in a room that Logan had chosen for 3 specific reasons: single entry point, solid exterior wall, and a connecting bathroom that gave access to a service corridor she could move through if the situation required it. She had specific instructions. He had gone over them 4 times because she was not someone who responded well to being told to simply wait, and the instructions had therefore been framed as your role in the operation, rather than stay there and don't move. He intercepted the first 2 men in the ground floor utility corridor. He had the advantage of knowing the space in the dark, which was not nothing. He took the first man out of the engagement quietly, with the controlled efficiency of someone who had made a decision long ago about what level of force was acceptable and what level wasn't. The second was faster and caught Logan's left arm with a solid forearm block that sent a spike of pain through the shoulder he'd had surgery on in 2019 and which had never been entirely the same. He noted the pain, filed it, kept moving. The next 12 minutes were the kind of thing that could not be accurately conveyed in the calm language he would later use to describe them. They were loud in the way that physical confrontations in enclosed spaces were loud, not gunshots. Because Voss's team appeared to be operating under the same instructions as the restaurant crew, which told Logan something important about what Sienna's enemies wanted but the hard, Non-cinematic sounds of people moving fast through tight spaces, of things breaking, of breath coming in controlled bursts, of a body hitting a hardwood floor with the full weight of someone who was no longer making decisions. Logan took a hit to the ribs, not the same ribs as the restaurant but adjacent, which was either unlucky or a pattern he needed to consider. He took another to the jaw that rattled something loose temporarily and made the right side of his vision do an unwelcome thing for about 15 seconds. He kept moving because stopping was not an option he had on the table. Cleared the ground floor. 4 men down, 3 still active, the police 12 minutes out. And then Derek Voss appeared in the main hallway. Logan had not seen him in person before, only in photographs from the intelligence file. He was taller than Logan had expected, mid-40s, with the physical posture of someone who had spent enough time in the field to have stopped trying to look intimidating and simply was. He was not holding anything. He stood center of the hallway with the lights still off and the way someone looks at a problem they've encountered before in a different form. Navy, Voss said. Not a question. Retired, Logan said. How retired? Enough. Voss looked at the hallway behind Logan. He was calculating Logan could see it in the stillness, the way his eyes moved. 4 of his people were down or out. The other 2 were somewhere in the East Wing, which meant they were close to where Sienna was. Your 2 in the East Wing, Logan said. They're not getting through that door. Can't know that. I spent 2 weeks building what's behind that door. I know it. Voss was quiet for a moment. This was a setup. Yes. Riley told you what we wanted him to tell you. Logan kept his eyes on Voss's hands. The access logs. The schedule. All of it was designed for you. Something moved through Voss's expression, not surprise. Exactly. But the recalibration of someone who'd just understood the scope of what had happened. Who are you? He said. You're not corporate security. No, then why? Logan looked at him. Because she asked. Voss moved. It was fast. Logan gave him that. He was a trained professional and he committed fully, which was the only way to commit when you were 2 people in a dark hallway and one of you understood it was ending. Logan took the first contact across his injured shoulder, felt something bright and white happen in the joint. Lost function in that arm for approximately 3 seconds, during which Voss pressed the advantage with the patience of someone who'd been in long confrontations before. Logan went down to one knee. He stayed there for the fraction of a second that he needed, absorbing what was happening physically, and in that fraction of a second, not metaphorically, not as a story he told later to explain himself, but literally. The way the brain does. Under extreme stress, he thought about Maya, sitting across from Dana's kitchen table, explaining why breakfast for dinner was underrated, and about the drawing on the wall in Astoria, and about coming home. He'd promised her the only kind of careful that ended with coming home. Came up off the knee. What followed was not elegant. His shoulder was not working correctly. His jaw was swollen on one side, and he was operating on adrenaline and muscle memory, and something that was less like courage and more like refusal. He used what was working and protected what wasn't, and he worked Voss toward the wall with the patient insistence of someone who had decided the outcome and was simply executing the steps to reach it. He put Voss down without killing him, because killing him would have been easier in one sense and more complicated in every other sense, and because Logan had made that particular decision about what he was and wasn't willing to become at a different time in his life and had not unmade it. Voss was on the floor, breathing hard, contained. Logan stood over him, also breathing hard, his left shoulder doing something concerning. From the East Wing, he heard the 2 remaining men trying the reinforced door he'd installed on Thursday afternoon, and not getting through it. He heard something that sounded like the door frame, taking a hit and holding. He'd built that door right. From outside the property, distantly but getting louder, he heard sirens. 17 minutes, faster than projected. He pressed the secondary signal confirmation on the device in his jacket pocket and then stood in the dark hallway above Derek Voss and breathed and let his body do what it needed to do with all the things that had just happened. The East Wing door opened. He turned. Sienna was standing in the hallway, the service corridor door open behind her. She had not apparently stayed entirely in the room. She was looking at him at the shoulder, at his face, at Voss on the floor, and her expression was the clearest he'd ever seen it, stripped of every professional surface. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm fine. Your shoulder." Sienna. He looked at her steadily. Are you hurt? No. The two in the east wing, they didn't get through the door. She crossed the hallway toward him. I heard everything. I stayed back until she stopped in front of him. Up close in the dark, she looked like someone who'd been running on controlled adrenaline for the last 20 minutes and was now starting to feel the edges of it. Are you sure you're okay? Ask me again in an hour. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Voss on the floor, and something hardened in her face, not cruelty, just the particular look of someone who had spent weeks living under threat and was now looking at the source of it in a different light. The sirens reached the property. The next 2 hours were the organized chaos of official response Connecticut State Police through the front gate. 2 FBI field agents who arrived 20 minutes after the state police and immediately began a complicated jurisdictional negotiation. EMTs who looked at Logan's shoulder and told him things he already knew. 2 men from the East Wing were found and detained in the service corridor. Voss was taken into custody, saying nothing, which Logan had expected. The other 4 were processed from where they'd been left, 2 of them requiring medical attention that Logan had also expected. He sat on the back steps of the main house while an EMT worked on his shoulder and watched the property fill up with law enforcement in the way that properties fill up with law enforcement, efficiently and without. Particular interest in the experience of being inside it. Sienna was giving a statement to one of the FBI agents. Logan watched her from a distance. The way she stood, straight, direct, providing information with the precise and organized manner of someone who understood that accuracy mattered more than emotion right now. The agent was taking notes rapidly. Whatever she was saying it well. An FBI agent came to Logan next, younger, with the careful energy of someone newer to this than they were letting on. He asked his questions, and Logan answered them with the same economy he applied to most things, and at the end the agent looked at his notes and said, "You were the one who designed the containment setup." "Yes." "You have a military background." "Yes." "What made you—" The agent seemed to be looking for the right frame. "This wasn't your situation. You didn't have to do this." Logan looked across the property to where Sienna was still talking to the other agent. Her arms crossed against the night chill, her expression controlled and professional. "No," he said, "I didn't." The agent waited, apparently expecting more. Logan didn't have more. That was the whole answer. At 4:30 in the morning, after the official statements were complete and most of the law enforcement presence had consolidated at the front of the property, Sienna found him sitting on the back steps where the EMT had left him. She sat down beside him without asking, which was the right call. There wasn't a chair involved, and she sat down anyway, close enough that he was aware of her shoulder near his uninjured one. They sat in silence for a while. The night was very quiet now. The sirens were gone. "It's over," she said finally. "The immediate part. What does that mean?" "It means we still don't know how much of the organization was compromised. It means the executives who financed this haven't been touched yet." He paused. "But the people who were coming for you tonight aren't coming anymore." She was quiet. "Then what happens to Marcus?" "That's the FBI's question now." "But what do you think?" Logan considered. "I think he made a choice for money, or for something he told himself was bigger than money, and he's going to spend a long time inside that choice." He looked at the tree line. Some people make a decision, and then spend everything they have convincing themselves it was the right one. "I don't know what Marcus's story is. I know what the evidence says he did." Sienna was quiet for a moment. "I hired him. I trusted his judgment for 6 years." "That's on him, not you. I'm not sure that's how accountability works." "Couldn't have known. I should have been paying more attention." She said it without self-pity, just the flat, honest assessment of someone taking a ledger reading. "I built something big, and I thought the systems were sound, and I stopped looking closely because looking closely is uncomfortable." She paused. "That's on me." Logan didn't argue with her. She wasn't wrong, and she knew she wasn't wrong, and arguing would have been a different kind of disrespect. "My daughter told me something," he said, "when she was about 6, right after Carrie, her mother, died." He paused. He didn't talk about this with people as a rule. She said, "I know we messed up a lot of things, but now we know which ones." I think she'd heard it from somewhere, a teacher maybe, or a cartoon. But she meant it. She was 6 years old and she meant it. Sienna looked at him. "Now you know which ones," he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. There was something in her expression that he recognized from the restaurant, that same quality of having processed the distance between the situation she'd thought she was in and the one she'd actually been in. Except this time it was about something larger than a physical threat. She looked away first. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it." The night was very quiet. The tree line was starting to show the first gray edge of a sky getting ready to change. Logan's shoulder ached steadily, and he was very tired in the clean way of someone who had done what they came to do. "I'm going to call Maya when it's light enough," he said. "Let her know I'm coming home." Sienna nodded. "She'll be glad." "Yeah." He looked at the sky. "She will." The call to Maya went through at 6:43 in the morning, when the sky over the Connecticut tree line had turned the particular pale gray that comes before actual color arrives. Logan stepped away from the back of the house, away from the remaining law enforcement presence and the residual machinery of what the night had been, and sat on a low stone wall at the edge of the property. His shoulder was wrapped and immobilized in the way the EMT had insisted on, which made holding the phone awkward. He managed. Maya answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been awake. "You called," she said. "I said I would. I know." I was just a pause, and in the pause he could hear exactly what she'd been doing, which was waiting. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay. Shoulder's a little banged up." "Nothing serious." "Which shoulder? Left. The surgery one?" "Yeah." A silence that had a specific texture to it, the texture of a 9-year-old processing information and deciding how to respond to it. "Does it hurt some? It'll be fine." "Okay." Another pause. "Is Sienna okay?" "She's fine. No one got to her." He heard Maya exhale a small sound, but deliberate, like she'd been holding something and was now setting it down. "Good," she said. "That's good. I'm going to come get you this afternoon. After I talk to some people here. I can stay at Dana's. If you need more time." "I don't need more time. I want to come get you." "Okay." And the single word had in it everything she didn't say, which Logan heard clearly. "Dana made waffles again this morning. She said they're better the second day." "That's not how waffles work." "I know," I told her. "She said I was wrong. Dana is wrong. I'm not going to tell her you said that." Probably wise. He stayed on with her for another few minutes, the comfortable drift of a conversation that didn't need a destination. And when he hung up, he sat on the stone wall for a moment longer and looked at the sky, which had moved from gray to something with actual light in it. His shoulder hurt. His jaw was stiff and would look worse by afternoon. He was tired in the accumulated way that came not just from the night but from the weeks before it, the sustained attention of building and running an operation on borrowed time and limited sleep. But he was sitting on a stone wall in early morning light, and his daughter had been awake waiting for his call, and the people who'd been trying to hurt Sienna Whitmore were in custody. He'd been in worse places at 6:43 in the morning. He went back inside. The federal investigation moved with the specific organized speed of an agency that had been waiting for exactly this kind of evidence package to land in its hands. Voss and his surviving team members were processed and charged within 48 hours. The digital trail Logan had documented the access logs, the scheduling data, the communication records between Marcus Riley and the network financing the operation gave federal prosecutors a foundation they described, in language that made it into several news reports, as unusually complete. Someone who understood both operational security and corporate information systems had apparently done significant preparatory work before the arrests were made. The reports did not name Logan Barrett. He preferred it that way. Marcus Riley was arrested on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after the Connecticut operation. Logan learned about it from Sienna, who texted him a single line, "It happened." He didn't run. He didn't run. Logan turned that over in his head. There was something in it, not sympathy, not exactly, but the particular human complexity of a person who did something indefensible and then, at the final moment, didn't add cowardice to the ledger. He wasn't sure what to make of Marcus Riley. He wasn't sure he needed to. He texted back, "Good." Then he made dinner for Maya, who had opinions about whether the pasta had been cooked long enough that turned out to be entirely correct, and the evening moved the way. Evenings moved in Astoria homework, the radiator making its sounds, Harold visible from the window on his evening constitutional, Maya explaining a conflict at school involving 2 friends, a jump rope, and what she described as a fundamental misunderstanding of the rules of fairness. The world outside their apartment was doing complicated things. The world inside it was doing the things it always did, and Logan held on to that. Sienna called on a Thursday, 10 days after Connecticut. The board met yesterday, she said. The executives connected to the financing, 3 of them, from 2 different companies, are being referred for prosecution. Their attorneys are already negotiating. Good. The FBI agent, the one who spoke to you at the estate Hargrove, he called me this morning. He said your operational setup was, and I'm quoting, unusually professional for a civilian consultant. He said that. I believe his exact word was remarkably. Logan was at the kitchen table with his second coffee, Maya at school, the apartment quiet in the way it was between 8:30 and 3. What did you tell him? I told him you used to be in the Navy. That's it, that's all he needed to know. A brief pause. He asked if you'd be willing to consult for them. The FBI. No, I told him you'd probably say that. Then why mention it? Because I wanted to hear you say it. Her voice had something in it that wasn't quite amusement, but was adjacent to it. He'd come to recognize this register. It was how she spoke when she was comfortable, which was different from how she spoke professionally. Professional Sienna was precise and controlled. The other version had a dryness to it that snuck up on you. I have something I want to talk to you about, she said. In person. Are you free Saturday? He thought about the schedule. Maya had the school thing, Saturday morning the ecosystem project presentation, which they'd been preparing for 2 weeks, and which Maya had informed him was, by her own assessment, quite good. Afternoon free, after 12, he said. I can come to Astoria. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Another pause. I'll bring lunch. Is Maya home Saturday afternoon? Yeah. Is that okay? Logan looked at the coffee in his mug for a moment. Yeah, he said. That's okay. She showed up at 12:15 with a paper bag from a deli he'd mentioned once, approximately 6 weeks ago in passing, and he registered that she'd remembered this without making a production of it. Maya was still buzzing from the presentation, which had gone well by her account and extremely well by her teacher's account. And she greeted Sienna with the comfortable directness of a child who had decided some time ago that this particular adult was acceptable. My presentation was good, Maya told her immediately. I heard. Sienna set the bag on the counter. What was your conclusion? About the ocean ecosystem. Maya sat on the counter, which Logan technically discouraged and rarely enforced. That everything is connected to everything else, and when one thing breaks, the break travels. But also that broken systems can repair themselves if you leave enough of the original structure intact. She paused. My teacher said that was a sophisticated conclusion for a 9-year-old. She's right, Sienna said. It is. I know. Maya said it without arrogance, just the calm acknowledgement of a fact. Do you think that's true? About systems? Sienna looked at her. I used to think you could repair broken systems by replacing the broken parts. I'm starting to think you're closer to right. Maya appeared to find this satisfying. She dropped off the counter and disappeared to her room, which was what she did when she'd gotten what she needed from a conversation, and was ready to move on. They ate lunch at the kitchen table, the same table with the cardboard castle base still occupying one corner, 3 weeks in and showing no signs of being completed or abandoned, which Maya had explained was because the best projects evolved, and Sienna laid out what she wanted to say with the directness she brought to difficult things. I want to offer you the director position again, she said. Sienna, I'm not done. She set down her fork. I know what you said. I know why you said it. I'm not offering it for the same reasons I offered it the first time. She paused, organizing it. For Connecticut, I spent a week doing a full review of my company's security culture. Not just the protocols, the culture. The way decisions were made, what information was siloed, why someone like Marcus could operate undetected for as long as he apparently did. Logan listened. I found 17 things wrong, she said. He looked at her. I used your number deliberately. The corner of her mouth moved. The point is that the problems weren't just technical. They were structural. People didn't feel safe flagging concerns upward. Information moved in one direction. I created a system that rewarded looking good over being honest. She was quiet for a moment. You told me once that patterns are predictable. I think I'd built a very predictable pattern, and I hadn't looked at it from the outside long enough to see it. Most people in your position don't look at it at all, Logan said. That's not an excuse. I know. I'm just saying. She looked at him steadily. I don't want a director of security. I want someone who will tell me when I'm building the wrong kind of walls in the wrong places, who understands both the physical and the structural problem. She paused. You do both. You've been doing both since the day you walked into my office. He was quiet. The salary is real and the position is real, she said. But what I'm actually asking is whether you'd be willing to keep doing what you've already been doing in an official capacity with a schedule that works around Maya. Logan looked at the kitchen table, the castle in the corner, the drawings on the wall above his head, which he'd looked at the first time she sat here. I need to think about it, he said. Okay, that's not a no. I know the difference, she said. And she did. He'd noticed this about her early on, the ability to distinguish between a no and a not yet, which was a thing that not everyone could do, and which he found more valuable the longer he knew her. He thought about it for 2 days. What he was actually thinking about, he understood with the honesty he applied to things when he was alone, was not the job. The job he could evaluate clearly its demands, its compatibility with Maya's schedule, its fit with what he was actually capable of and willing to do. That analysis took about 40 minutes and landed somewhere around yes, it could work, with conditions. What took 2 days was the other thing. The thing that had nothing to do with employment. He had spent 2 years building a life that was narrow on purpose. Not small, he didn't think of it as small, but deliberately bounded. The apartment, Maya, the school walk, Harold's medium days, Thursday pizza, the cardboard castle going nowhere. He had built this life in the specific shape that remained after losing Carrie, and it had held. It was real. It functioned. Sienna Whitmore had not disrupted this. She had somehow, without apparent effort and without being asked, slipped into the margins of it Saturday afternoons, hot chocolate in conference rooms, lunch from a deli he'd mentioned once, sitting on stone walls at 6 in the morning while the sky changed color. He thought about what Dana had said through Maya. Ask her to dinner sometime, as like a regular dinner. He thought about the way Sienna had looked at the drawings on his wall. Not the first time which he'd registered, every time since. They anchored something. On the second day he called her. I'll take the position, he said, with conditions. Name them. Schedule is built around school hours. If Maya needs me, work waits. Agreed. I report directly to you. Not through a chain that can be manipulated. Agreed. And I'm going to keep telling you when something is wrong, even when you don't want to hear it. Logan. Her voice was dry. That's the job description. I know. I want it on record that I'm aware. Pause. Is there anything else? He'd been standing in his kitchen, phone to his ear, looking at the wall. He said, there's one more thing. It's not about the job. Okay. My daughter thinks I should ask you to dinner. An actual dinner, not a working one. He paused. She had Dana relay the message, so I've been informed twice. A silence on Sienna's end. Not uncomfortable, just present. Dana sounds like someone worth listening to, Sienna said, finally. She makes good waffles. That's a credible character reference. So, he looked at the cardboard castle. Dinner, if you want. No agenda. I want, she said. It was simple and unhesitating, and it landed in the quiet of his kitchen without drama, just as a fact. Saturday, he said. Maya picks the restaurant. I'm warning you now. Her criteria are specific. I can work with specific. Maya picked a Thai place in Astoria that she described as having the best mango sticky rice in the known universe, a claim she was prepared to defend on technical grounds. Sienna, to her visible credit, did not argue with this assessment, but asked for the technical grounds anyway. And Maya provided them at length while Logan ate his curry and watched the two of them talk across the table with the particular quality of attention he'd seen in Sienna only a handful of times, the real kind, not the professional kind. It was not a complicated evening. The food was good. The restaurant was loud, in the cheerful way of places that are always full. Maya explained 3 different things about ocean ecosystems that had not made it into her presentation due to time constraints. Sienna listened to all of them. Afterward, they walked back to the apartment in the early evening, Maya between them, and at the corner with Harold's house, Maya stopped to assess Harold's emotional state. Medium-high, she determined. His ears are doing the thing. What thing? Sienna asked. Maya demonstrated somehow using her own arms. Sienna observed this with seriousness. I think I see it, Sienna said. It means he's anticipating something positive. How do you know it's positive? Because his tail is doing a different thing too. You have to read the whole dog. Sienna looked at Harold. Harold looked back at Sienna with the expression of an animal that had accepted his role in the universe. I think I've been making the mistake of reading partial information, Sienna said. Generally, Maya appeared to find this response satisfying. She moved ahead of them toward the building, and for a half block, Logan and Sienna walked without speaking, which was something they had gotten quietly comfortable with, the particular ease of two people who didn't need to fill space. She's remarkable, Sienna said, quietly, not for Maya to hear. She's 9 going on 40, she's you, Sienna said. The way she processes things, the directness, she got it from somewhere. Logan thought about that. He thought about Carrie, who had been warm and funny and oblique in the way of someone who approached the world with instinct rather than analysis, and how Maya had gotten some of that too, the warmth, the way she could read a basset hound's ears. She was both of them, assembled in a way he could see if he looked carefully, and then couldn't separate if he looked too long. She's her own thing, he said. Yes, Sienna paused. That's the right answer. At the building door, Maya said goodnight to Sienna with a hug that appeared to surprise Sienna not unpleasantly, but genuinely, in the way of someone not quite prepared for it, and then went upstairs with the practiced efficiency of a child who understood when the adults needed a minute. Logan stood on the sidewalk. The evening was cool, not cold, the particular early fall temperature that hadn't yet committed to a season. I'm glad you stayed, he said, which was not precisely what he'd planned to say, but was true. Sienna looked at him. In the ambient light from the building and the street, he could see that the professional surface was entirely gone, which happened more and more in unguarded moments. What was there instead was a woman who had built something enormous and had recently been forced to understand its cost, who was standing on a sidewalk in Astoria in the aftermath of several very hard weeks, and who was looking at him with an expression that didn't need a translation. I'm glad too, she said. He walked her to her car, which was half a block down. She unlocked it and turned back, and in the ordinary streetlight, he noticed what he'd noticed, the first day she'd stood at his intercom, that she was a person who carried effort in the way she stood, the habit of presenting a managed version of herself that required continuous maintenance. She wasn't doing it right now. The dinner was good, she said. Maya's mango sticky rice case is strong. She'll be pleased to hear it. Don't tell her I said so. She's already operating at high confidence. Comes by it naturally. Sienna smiled a real one, which he'd learned to distinguish from the professional version. Good night, Logan. Good night. She got in the car. He stood on the sidewalk until she pulled out, which was a thing he did without deciding to do it, and then walked back to the building and upstairs and found Maya on the couch, technically past bedtime, reading with the focused innocence of someone who had calculated the odds of this being enforced and bet correctly. She's nice, Maya said, without looking up from her book. Go to bed. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Bed. Maya dog-eared her page, which Logan had opinions about, and which she did specifically to prompt those opinions, and stood up. The hallway she turned. She looks at you the way Dana looks at the news. She's thinking about what it means. Logan looked at his daughter. That's a very specific observation, he said. I know. She disappeared down the hallway. Night, Dad. He stood in the living room for a moment. The apartment was quiet. The radiator had finally been fixed 2 weeks ago, without drama, and the absence of its noise was something he still occasionally noticed. Maya's drawings on the kitchen wall, the cardboard castle, patient and unfinished. Carrie's photograph on the nightstand, still facing the wall, though he'd been meaning for a week to turn it around. He went to the bedroom. He turned the photograph around. Carrie looked back at him from the frame, laughing at something off camera, her dark hair half out of a ponytail, one hand raised like she was making a point. He looked at it for a long moment. He wasn't replacing her. He knew that clearly. He knew Maya knew it too, in whatever way 9-year-olds knew the things they knew, without having language for all of it. There was no replacement and no subtraction. There was only what continued and what was added, and whether you had the nerve to let both exist at the same time. He set the photograph down carefully, facing out. Then he went to sleep. The offer from the FBI came in writing 2 weeks later. Logan declined in writing, politely, briefly, without explanation, because the explanation was nobody's business. He had started at Whitmore Technologies officially on a Monday, which Maya marked by presenting him with a drawing at breakfast. Two figures in a tall building, labeled Dad Security and Sienna Boss, with a third small figure in the corner labeled Maya, Visiting. Below it, good luck on your first day of real work. He put it on the wall above the kitchen table, next to the others. His first day involved 3 meetings, 1 security systems review, and a 40-minute conversation with Sienna about the internal reporting culture she wanted to rebuild, the specific changes to structure and policy that would make it harder for another Marcus Riley to operate invisibly. He found 16 things that needed changing before she'd even finished her outline. You counted, she said. I always count. Is 16 better or worse than 17? It means you've already fixed one. He looked at his notes. Possibly by accident, she laughed. He'd heard her laugh before, but not often, and each time it was slightly startling, not because it was unusual, but because it was unguarded, in a way her professional register never was. And it changed her face in a way that was difficult not to notice. Okay, she said, getting back to the outline. 16 it is. What's first? He told her. They worked for 3 hours. Sienna's assistant brought coffee at some point and set it on the desk without comment, and neither of them looked up from what they were doing. And later, Logan, walking through the lobby with its still inadequate camera coverage, heading for the subway and the school pickup and the specific reliable machinery of his actual life, he registered that the 3 hours had passed the way time passes when you're working on something that matters with someone you trust. He was surprised by how uncomplicated that felt. He emerged from the building into midtown afternoon light, people moving in every direction with the focused purposefulness of the city at 4 p.m. And he turned toward the subway thinking about Maya's presentation, and Harold's ears, and the cardboard castles, and whether Sienna had ever been to the museum on 77th that Maya had decided was her current favorite. She hadn't mentioned it, which probably meant she hadn't, which was something that could be corrected. He had somewhere to come back to, Maya had told him. He remembered that. The difference now, he thought, walking into the subway entrance, was that the somewhere was getting larger. Quietly, without announcement, without anyone planning for it. Just the way things changed when you stopped holding the shape of your life so tightly that nothing could find its way in. He took the 7 train toward Astoria. Outside the subway window, the city moved past in its particular way, close and fast and indifferent and entirely alive. And Logan Barrett sat with his notebook and his shoulder that was healing, and the new badge in his jacket pocket, and thought about nothing important for. Exactly as long as the commute allowed, which was, as it turned out, enough. Cardboard Castle never got finished. Logan made peace with this somewhere around month 3 of its existence, when Maya announced that the project had evolved past the point of completion and was now a permanent installation representing, in her words, the idea of a castle rather than an actual one. He was not entirely sure what this meant architecturally, but he understood it in the way he understood most of Maya's conclusions, as something that had its own internal logic, even when the external logic was unclear. Sienna, when she heard this explanation, said it sounded like most of the technology products she'd evaluated in the last 5 years. Maya thought this was the funniest thing she'd heard in weeks. That was November. By December, Sienna had stopped being a visitor at the Astoria apartment and had started being someone who knew where the extra coffee filters were kept and which drawer held the scissors and why you did not, under any circumstances, move Maya's current reading book from the left arm of the couch because Maya had a system and the system had rules. None of this happened quickly. Logan wanted to be honest about that, even in his own accounting of it, because the version of events where 2 people find their way to each other in the clean wake of a shared crisis was a version he didn't fully trust. The real version had friction. It had the particular difficulty of 2 adults who had each, in different ways, learned to operate alone and had built the habits of alone into their daily architecture. Sienna canceled dinner twice in December, not deliberately. Not with bad intent. She was managing the aftermath of a company that had survived a conspiracy and needed rebuilding, and there were weeks where she worked until midnight and ate at her desk and called Logan to apologize in the flat, exhausted voice of someone running past empty. He told her he understood, and he did And he was also aware that understanding it didn't fully neutralize the particular low-grade frustration of watching someone disappear into work the way Sienna disappeared completely, as if a door had closed. He told her this once, in January, not with anger, just with honesty, because he'd decided somewhere around the Connecticut estate that honesty was the only thing worth offering her. "You vanish," he said. They were on the phone, late Maya asleep. "When it gets hard, you put your head down, and you vanish." "I understand why. I'm just telling you that I notice it." A silence. "I know," she said finally, not defensively. Just acknowledging it. "I'm not asking you to change how you work. I'm asking you to tell me when you're doing it so I don't have to guess." "That's a reasonable thing to ask." "I think so." Another silence, shorter. "I don't always know when I'm doing it," she said. "It's not a decision I make. It's just the work is there and everything else recedes, and by the time I surface I've been underwater for 2 weeks." "I know." And he did. He recognized the mechanism even if the trigger was different from his own. "Just text me. It doesn't have to be a conversation. Just I'm in the hole. Talk later. That's it? That's it." He heard her exhale the same sound Maya made when she put something down. "Okay," Sienna said. "I can do that." She wasn't always good at it. She wasn't always good at not noting when she'd forgotten. They had, in February, one genuinely difficult conversation in Sienna's office that involved raised voices, his more than hers, which surprised him slightly and ended with both of them standing on opposite sides of her desk, looking at each other in the aftermath of it, and him saying, "I'm not good at this either. I want you to know I'm aware of that." And her saying, "I know." That's actually helping. The yelling helped. The "I'm not good at this either" helped. He thought about that. "I spent 2 years," he said, "not practicing any of this. I'm starting from a pretty long pause." "Me too," she sat down. "I was in a relationship at 27 that ended because the other person said I was more committed to my company than to him." She paused. "He wasn't wrong. I just didn't have the framework to understand that at the time. And now I have more framework than I know what to do with." She looked at him across the desk. "I'm still learning how to use it." Logan sat down, too, on the chair he'd occupied the first time he came to this office, when he'd been counting the ways her security setup was inadequate. The glass walls still faced the open floor plan. He'd had the film coating installed in November, which reduced the visibility issue by 60%. She'd agreed to it without protest, which he still considered a small miracle. "We're probably going to keep being bad at this periodically," he said. "Probably. That's okay, is it?" He looked at her directly. "My marriage was good. It was genuinely good. And we were bad at things periodically. That's not what made it good or bad." He paused. "What made it good was that we didn't use the hard parts as evidence that it wasn't working." Sienna held his gaze for a moment. Something moved through her expression, not sadness, not exactly, but the specific quality of someone receiving something they needed and hadn't asked for. "Tell me about her," she said. "Carrie, if you want to." He'd been waiting, somewhere underneath everything, for this question. Not with dread, just knowing it would come, and not knowing what he'd do with it when it arrived. "She was funny," he said, "not performer funny, quiet funny. She'd say a thing in the middle of a completely ordinary conversation that would land like you wouldn't see it coming, and then it hit, and it was exactly right." He paused. "She was a better parent than I was in the early years. She as my moods in ways I was still learning. She made decisions on instinct that turned out to be right more often than my analysis did. She sounds like someone who trusted herself." She did. That was the thing about Carrie, she didn't spend energy doubting what she already knew. It wasn't arrogance. It was just clarity. He was quiet for a moment. "I miss that about her, the clarity." "You have that," Sienna said. "You have it more than almost anyone I've met. I learned some of it from her." Sienna looked at her desk for a moment. "I'm glad you told me. I should have earlier." "No," she said. "When you were ready." He looked at her. This was the thing about Sienna that he'd been assembling across months, the way she understood the distinction between patience and waiting, between giving someone space and simply not pressing when pressing would cost them something they hadn't offered yet. She was not naturally patient. He knew that. She pushed and moved and decided and drove. But she had something else operating underneath it that recognized when to stop, when the cost of pushing was higher than the value of what you'd get. He'd seen it with Maya from the beginning. She never once performed interest in Maya. She never tried to fill a role. She showed up as herself, curious and direct, and occasionally clumsy in the way adults were clumsy with children when they forgot to perform. And Maya had responded to this with the specific radar of a child who could distinguish authentic from manufactured at a distance of about 15 feet. What Maya called it, to Logan, in the unguarded language of a 9-year-old who had not yet learned to soften her observations. She doesn't try to be my friend. She just is one. It's different. Logan knew exactly what she meant. Spring came to Astoria in the specific incremental way of Northeast springs, not arriving so much as accumulating, each week slightly less cold than the last, the tree on their block producing leaves that appeared first as the idea of leaves and then as actual ones. Harold the Basset Hound transitioned from his winter state, which was philosophical, to spring state, which Maya assessed as cautiously optimistic. Logan's shoulder healed, not completely, because the surgery's shoulder never healed completely, but to the point where he stopped noticing it, except when the weather changed or when he reached for something above his head at the wrong angle. He'd worked with the physical therapist Sienna had pushed him toward in January, doing the exercises he'd been told to do, and doing them consistently, because consistency was something he understood how to apply. His work at Whitmore Technologies had settled into a shape he hadn't expected to find comfortable. It was genuinely interesting. Not in the adrenaline-loaded way of what he'd done before, but in the more sustainable way of a problem that kept revealing new layers. Corporate security wasn't just physical. It was information, culture, the way people behaved when they thought no one was watching, the gap between official systems and actual ones. Every organization had this gap, and the gap was always where the damage entered. He'd rebuilt Sienna's security architecture from the ground up over the first 4 months, and what he'd built was not elegant, it was functional and redundant and unglamorous in the way that things built to actually work were unglamorous. He'd installed processes that created friction, not ease, because ease was what Marcus Riley had exploited. He'd built reporting channels that bypassed hierarchy at key points, because hierarchy was what had kept the mole invisible. He'd created accountability loops that inconvenienced people, including Sienna, because the alternative was a system that looked good until it didn't. She had not argued with any of it. She had argued with exactly one thing, the request that she stop taking certain calls on her personal phone while in the office. That's excessive, she said. It's a documented vulnerability. Logan, it's my personal phone, which is connected to the corporate network when you're in the building, which means.
Okay.
She held up a hand. You're going to win this one, and we both know it. I'm just registering my objection. Objection registered. Do you actually register it, or do you just say that? I registered it, he said, and then I noted that it doesn't change the security assessment. She looked at him with the expression she'd developed for moments like this, not quite exasperated, not quite amused. The specific blend that existed only for situations involving Logan Barrett being technically correct about something she didn't want to be technically correct. Fine, she said. New phone protocol. You win. I'll let you know when I win. I'm still finding things. That's genuinely concerning. It should be. It means the system is complex enough to have corners. He looked at her. That's not a bad thing. Simple systems have simple failures. Complex systems have corners that need watching. She was quiet for a moment. Is that a general philosophy or specifically about corporate security? Both, he said. Probably. The conversation that mattered most happened in April, on a Sunday afternoon when the weather had finally committed to something warmer than 50 degrees, and Maya had gone to Dana's for the weekend. And Logan and Sienna were at the apartment doing nothing in particular, which was itself something it had taken them time to learn. The being together without a purpose, the ordinary Sunday texture of two people in the same space not performing anything. Sienna was on the couch, with a report she kept meaning to read, and kept setting face down in her lap. Logan was at the kitchen table with coffee and the week's schedule. Apartment was quiet. I've been thinking about something, Sienna said. He looked up. She set the report down. She was in jeans and a sweater that she'd left here 3 weeks ago, and had apparently decided was now resident, and she looked less like the CEO he'd met across a restaurant than like the person he understood her to be when she wasn't managing how she appeared. I've been thinking about what I said in the fall. That I built everything because achievement felt safer than the other thing. Love, he said. Love. She said the word plainly, like she was testing whether it broke anything. It didn't. I've been thinking about whether that's still true. Whether I'm still doing it. Are you? She thought about it honestly, which was the thing he appreciated most about her in these moments. She didn't answer first and think second. Less, she said. I'm less inside it. But it's not gone, she paused. I catch myself sometimes in the middle of a good thing, waiting for it to be the reason something goes wrong. What? Like this. She looked at him steadily. You. Like Maya. Like Sunday afternoons that don't have a point. She paused. Like being happy about something and immediately cataloging the ways it could break. Logan put down his coffee. That's not a flaw. It feels like one. It's what people do when they've lost things, he said. You build a map of the exits because you've needed to find them before. He looked at her. Doesn't mean you're going to use them. How do you know? Because you're still here. Every time you've had a reason to back up, you stayed. He paused. So have I. That's not nothing. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, a car went by on the street below. The tree was doing its April thing with the light. I love you, she said. It was not dramatic. It landed in the Sunday quiet of the apartment, like something that had been making its way toward this moment for a long time, and had finally arrived without fanfare, exactly where it was supposed to. Logan looked at her across the kitchen table, with the cardboard castle in the corner, and the drawings on the wall, and the coffee getting cold. I know, he said. Then I love you too. I've known that for a while. How long? He thought about being honest. The stone wall. Connecticut. Watching the sky get light. She was quiet. Then that was months ago. Yes. You didn't say anything. You were dealing with a federal investigation and a company in crisis. Logan. Her voice had something in it between exasperation and something warmer. The timing was what it was. He shrugged. It kept. Some things keep. She looked at him. Then she laughed, the real laugh, the unguarded one, and it did the thing it always did to the room, changed its quality slightly, made it lighter. You are the most infuriating person, she said. You hired me. I'm aware. She stood up from the couch and came to the kitchen table, and he stood too. And what happened was not cinematic, and not orchestrated, and not anything other than two people in an Astoria apartment on a Sunday afternoon in April, who had taken a long and complicated path to a simple place. They were not perfect at it. This needs to be said clearly, because the story of two people choose each other is almost always told in the version where choosing solves things, and it doesn't. Clarifies things. It creates a foundation. But the building still requires work, and work requires showing up when showing up is inconvenient, and inconvenience is most of it. Sienna still disappeared into work sometimes. Logan still had weeks where the shoulder ached and his sleep was bad, and he was shorter with people than he meant to be, including her. They still had the occasional difficult conversation in which both of them said things that were technically accurate and emotionally imprecise and required a follow-up conversation to correct. Maya watched all of this with the particular attention of a child who understood more than she let on, and let on more than adults typically expected. She was not anxious about it. She asked Logan once, on a school morning walk past Harold, whether having Sienna around was going to change things. Some things, he said. Which things? Less quiet, probably. More Saturday dinners. Someone else's opinion on whether the cereal has been in the milk too long. Maya considered. What does she think about the cereal? Haven't asked yet. You should find out before it becomes an issue. He looked at her. That's very practical. I learned it from you. She stopped to look at Harold, who was doing something new with his left ear. Medium high, she determined. Same as last week. You think he has a consistent baseline. Everyone has a consistent baseline. Point is knowing what it is. She looked at Logan. What's Sienna's baseline? He thought about it, focused. A little tightly wound. Funnier than she looks in meetings. Maya nodded slowly. I think she's lonely, she said. Not sad. Just she hasn't had a lot of people who stayed. Logan looked at his daughter. I want her to know we're staying, Maya said. Simply, as if this were obvious. As if the decision had been made a long time ago by someone with more clarity than most adults managed. He didn't say anything for a moment. Yeah, he said. Me too. Question of what came next arrived not in a dramatic moment, but in a Tuesday evening conversation in June. After dinner at the apartment, Maya asleep in the specific total commitment way of a child who had played outside for 3 hours. Sienna was helping Logan with the dishes, which had become a domestic fact of certain evenings without anyone deciding it would be. "I've been looking at apartments," Sienna said. He looked at her. "In Astoria, a few blocks from here." She handed him a bowl to dry. "Mine is too far, and it's built for a different version of what I was trying to be. All that space." She paused. "I spent 2 years in that penthouse eating takeout alone and telling myself I preferred it." "Did you?" "I preferred not examining whether I preferred it." She looked at the window. "The lease is up in September." Logan dried the bowl. He looked at the kitchen, the drawings, the castle, the extra coffee filters in the second cabinet from the left. He thought about the apartment in the particular way you thought about a space, when you understood its edges, completely every sound the radiator made. Which floorboard, the quality of morning light in October versus March. "You could look here," he said. She turned toward him. "This building has a 3-bedroom on the second floor," he said. "Mrs. Calloway mentioned it last month. She's moving to her daughter's in September." He looked at the bowl in his hands. "Bigger than this. Maya could have a real study instead of a corner of her room." He paused. "And you'd have space. For the work you bring home." Before he stopped. "If you want that." Sienna looked at him. In the kitchen light, she was exactly herself, no managed surface, no professional register, just a woman standing at a sink who had gotten to a place she hadn't entirely planned to get to and was deciding what to do with being here. "You're asking me to live with you," she said. "I'm telling you a unit is available." "Logan, yes," he said. "I'm asking." She looked at him for a long moment. The apartment was quiet around them, Maya's deep sleep quiet, Harold existing, somewhere on the block quiet, the city going about its business outside the window the way the city always did, regardless of what was being decided in apartments above it. "Yes," she said. They moved into the second-floor unit in October, which felt fitting. October was when everything had started, in a different sense, and there was something that Logan acknowledged privately about continuity, about circles, about the way a year could contain more change than the previous 5, without announcing its intentions in advance. The move was not graceful. Sienna had more things than she realized. The penthouse had a particular talent for making volume invisible through scale. And when the scale changed, the volume became apparent in the form of 17 boxes from the home office alone. Maya supervised the arrangement of furniture with the authority of someone who had opinions about flow and natural light, and had apparently developed these opinions fully formed from some unknown source. "The couch can't go there," Maya told the movers. "Maya," Logan said. "It blocks the afternoon light. If you put it there, the whole room goes dark at 4. The movers looked at Logan. Logan looked at Maya. Maya looked at the couch position with the certainty of someone who was correct. "She's right," Sienna said, from behind a stack of boxes. "Move it left." They moved it left. The afternoon light held. The community safety program Logan had been building at the Riverside Center in Astoria had started with one Wednesday evening class of 11 people, mostly women, various ages, none of them with any prior training, and had grown by spring of the following year to 3 sessions a week, 64 regular participants, and a waiting list. He ran it with a former NYPD officer named Garza, who'd retired early due to a knee situation, and who had both the practical knowledge and the specific personality that made people feel capable rather than inadequate. What Logan had understood building the program was that most people didn't need to be turned into fighters. They needed to understand the difference between a situation developing and a situation that had already developed, because one of those things had exits and the other one didn't. They needed to know what their body was going to do before they needed it to do something else. And they needed someone to tell them. They needed someone that the instinct they'd been taught to ignore the feeling that something was wrong before they could name what was the most important tool they had. He taught the instinct class himself. He liked it most of all. A woman named Rosa, 58, who'd come to the first class because her daughter had pushed her and who had told Logan flatly in week 1 that she didn't think she could learn anything useful, told him in month 4 that she had walked away from a situation in a parking garage that she previously would have talked herself out of leaving. "I just felt it," she said, "and I left. Before anything happened." "That's the whole thing," Logan told her. "That's all of it." She looked skeptical. "That's it?" listening to yourself before you need a reason. Everything else we teach is for the situations where you didn't get to leave early. He paused. But most situations you get to leave early. Rosa thought about this. Why don't people tell you that? It seems like the first thing. Because it doesn't look like a skill, he said. It doesn't have a technique. People want something they can practice in a room. He paused. But you can practice it. You practice it every time you trust what you already know. She came back the following Wednesday. She brought her neighbor. Maya turned 11 in November, which she marked by informing Logan that she was moving into a more analytical phase of her development and that he should adjust his expectations accordingly. He asked what that meant in practical terms. She said it meant she was going to have more opinions about more things and would appreciate having them engaged with seriously. He told her that nothing about this represented a change in existing conditions. She considered this. Fair, she said. Sienna gave her a book about ocean biology that was written for adults, which Maya received with a seriousness that was better than any gratitude speech could have been. She read it in 11 days and then had 7 questions, which she presented to Sienna over breakfast on a Saturday, with the focused attention of someone who had prepared. Sienna answered 6 of them directly and said the 7th required her to look something up, which she did that afternoon, and sent Maya the answer via text with 3 additional links she thought might be relevant. Maya showed Logan the text thread. She looked it up, Maya said. She said she would. Most adults say they will. Maya looked at the phone. She did. Logan looked at his daughter. She was 11 years old and sitting at a kitchen table that had held a cardboard castle for 8 months before finally being retired to the hallway in an honorary capacity, and she was looking at a text thread from Sienna Whitmore with the expression of someone tallying something important. She stays, Maya said. Not a question, she stays, Logan said. Maya put the phone down and went back to her breakfast with the settled quality of someone who has confirmed what they already knew and can now proceed. There is a version of this story that wants to end with a wedding, and there was a small ceremony at a botanical garden in Queens the following June. 12 guests, including Dana and her Waffles for Dinner philosophy and Garza from the community center, and one of Maya's school friends who was the designated documentation photographer and took 67 photos, 40 of which were slightly blurry in ways that somehow made them more honest. Maya carried the rings and gave a speech that Logan had not known she was preparing, which she delivered with the confidence of someone who had been thinking about what she wanted to say for a long time. What she said was, "My dad taught me that coming home is the most important part of any mission. Sienna taught me that home is bigger than I thought it was. I think they taught each other that too." That was the whole speech. 47 seconds. There was not a single person in the garden who didn't need a moment afterward. The wedding, while true and while it mattered, is not the real ending of this story. Because stories about people don't actually end, they find a point where you can stop watching and trust that the thing will continue. The point where you can stop watching is something like this. A Saturday morning, a year after the wedding. The Astoria apartment, the 2nd floor unit with the afternoon light and the couch in the right position. Maya at the kitchen table, with a textbook and the expression of someone engaged in a private disagreement with the material. Sienna at the counter making coffee. She'll inevitably make too strong, and Logan will inevitably say nothing about, because some things you learn to carry. Logan himself, just back from the morning run, he'd taken up 6 months ago, partly for the shoulder, and partly because Garza had been annoying about it, and partly because there was something useful about an hour before the day. Started where the only requirement was to keep moving. He came in through the door, and Maya said, without looking up, "You were gone longer than usual." Went past the park. Harold wasn't out. I checked from the window. He was out. He looked medium. Did he look different from his usual medium? He looked like Harold. Maya considered this deeply. Sienna set a mug on the counter for Logan and went back to her own, and the apartment had around it the quality of a Saturday morning that had not been planned and did not need to be the lived-in. Specific, unglamorous texture of people who had figured out how to occupy the same space without it costing them. Logan picked up the coffee. He looked at the wall above the kitchen table still covered in drawings. Though the collection had evolved over the years, older ones replaced by newer ones, a few that Maya had specifically requested be kept regardless of age. Carrie's photograph was in the living room now, on a shelf with other photographs, in the ordinary company of the life that had accumulated around it. He could look at it directly. He had been able to for a while. This was what he'd learned, in the end, that he hadn't fully believed when someone first told him that moving forward and holding on were not opposites. That you could carry the people you'd lost without being weighted to the spot where you lost them. That the heart was not a container with a fixed capacity where new things required the removal of old ones. That it expanded imperfectly and without announcement when you let it. He had also learned, and this one had taken longer, had required more failure, more of the difficult February conversations, and the missed dinners, and the moments of saying things imprecisely, and having to say them again, that love, the actual sustained kind, was not a feeling you achieved. It was a practice, like the exercises for the shoulder. Like Maya's ecosystem presentation. Like Rosa leaving the parking garage before she had a reason to, because she'd learned to trust what she already knew. You showed up. You were honest when honesty was uncomfortable. You stayed in the room when the easier thing was to leave it. You asked for what you needed and accepted that the other person was also trying, even when trying wasn't the same as getting it right. This was not a revelation. It was the kind of thing that was obvious in summary and difficult in practice, the way most true things were. Logan drank his coffee. Maya turned a page in her textbook and made a sound indicating she had encountered something interesting or infuriating and had not yet determined which. Sienna sat down at the table with her too strong coffee and the report she'd been meaning to read and would probably not read today either, and she looked across the table at Logan with the expression he'd learned to read the way Maya had taught him, to read Harold the whole thing, not the surface, and what it said was simple and unremarkable and exactly enough. We're home. This was the thing he'd wanted to be able to tell the version of himself sitting on that subway 2 years ago, riding the 7 train back to Astoria, with a broken rib and a phone full of missed calls and the careful, narrow life he'd built for good reasons. That the narrowness had been necessary for a time, and that necessary things could also be temporary. That the mission he'd been running, keeping Maya safe, keeping them both upright, keeping the shape of their life intact through the specific gravity of loss, had not ended when Sienna arrived. It had changed. The parameters had expanded. Everyone returns from a mission alive. That had been his measure, once. The number that told you whether it had been a success. Fatherhood had replaced it with something harder to count. Harder to count because it never stopped, because there was no debrief, because the mission was always ongoing, and the metrics were things like a 9-year-old handing you masking tape and a reading book on the left arm of the couch, and a text answered with 3 extra links because she said she would. And then Sienna had given him something else to add to the measure, the thing he hadn't known he was still learning how to want, that you could survive the worst thing and still, against your own prior expectations, end up somewhere that felt like beginning. Coffee was good, despite being too strong. Outside, the street had started doing its Saturday thing, foot traffic and someone's music and a distant horn, and the city, indifferent and enormous and somehow home. Maya said, without preamble, I think this textbook is wrong about tidal patterns. Tell me why you think that, Sienna said, and Maya told her.